So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
That's tasty. What are we drinking today?
You had to ask me that, didn't you? It is a
I didn't
hazy, tropical breeze IPA from Hellbent Brewing Company. I'm definitely confident about the where it's from. Less confident about the string of syllables that I put before that. But it's something along those lines, and it tastes fruity and very good.
That it does. And an easier question, what movies are we talking about today?
Ooh, we are going to be talking about some Paul Verhoeven classics, such as RoboCop, Starship Troopers, and the Michael Mann film released in 2006, Miami Vice, starring Jamie Foxx and Colin Farrell.
Got some action movies for the first time in a while.
And for the first time in our local while, not the listeners' while, we're going to be doing first impressions in, gosh, it's been at least 3 weeks. So let's do first impressions. What do we have today, Michael?
We have Project Power, a Netflix title, coming up sometime in August, as well as She Dies Tomorrow from Amy Seimetz. Which one are we doing first?
We are going to be starting with Project Power.
Power, power, speak a little louder.
If there was a pill
Hungry for that money, I'm coming to devour.
that could give you 5 minutes
Spit it so they get it. I'm embedded with the power.
of pure power,
I'm embedded with the power.
would you take it? You don't know who I am and what I'm about, but I'll do anything to find that source. Listen to my voice. Am I lying?
Welcome to Project Power. Our goal is simple: the next evolution of the human species.
All right, Michael, that was the trailer for Project Power, starring Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Break it to me.
Well, you named two actors who I like, who I think could be fun. I think this looks fun. It looks a little silly. I don't know how much I care for some of this imagery. The concept is, I gather that there is it's about a pill that gives you superpowers for 5 minutes. It also looks like when you take it, you just burst into flames. Just kind of just a corny image, I guess, but it looks kind of fun. The action looks entertaining enough, I guess. I don't know that I have any real sharp thoughts here, but I think this could I could zone out to this for a while. What about you?
Well, I'll provide some clarity first. Not everyone bursts into flames. Everyone has a different reaction to the pill and has different powers. And the focus of that trailer was, for a little bit, the guy that caught on fire and then actually exploded. So the risk is exploding, potentially, if that is your power. Well, since we last saw each other, I watched The Old Guard, Michael, and that movie was terrible. And it also had a semi-decent trailer with people that I like in Matthias Schoenaerts and Charlize Theron. And this movie also has people I like. I don't remember what I've seen Dominique Fishbank in, but I really remember responding to her performances in the past, or at least one performance, and I have no recollection of what that film was. So I'm excited for Joseph Gordon-Levitt to get really overpaid. Very disappointed it's a superpower-related film, and I expect this will be bad, but it does indeed have a trailer that makes it look fun.
I would agree. I think their trailers are usually pretty entertaining. I think the odds... What do you think the odds are that they play the Kanye West song Power? Like 30%? Higher than that? No one man should have all this power. That just seems like that line is going to have its place.
Too on the nose with Jamie Foxx in the film.
And he knows Kanye. He might be like, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, I have a feeling that right now Netflix might not be trying to overspend on Kanye, just currently in our landscape. So I'm going to say that all that extra money went to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and we're more likely to see some Billie Eilish, I would project.
That seems plausible.
So, all right, well, on to a title that I'm much more excited about, She Dies Tomorrow.
Hi. How's the new house?
Good. Can you come over?
I can't. Are you okay?
I am going to die tomorrow.
What is going on?
There is no tomorrow for me.
All right, listen, Amy, I'm really freaking out right now.
I feel like you put this idea of dying in my head. Can you just call me back?
All right, we just watched the trailer for She Dies Tomorrow. How do you feel about this one?
Easy answer. Very positive.
Nice.
Very excited. This one sparks joy.
Love it.
I am very thrilled to know that this is coming VOD this coming month, in the month of August. Is that correct?
Yeah, like next week or the week after, pretty soon.
This looks humorous and really expertly written, very methodical. Cinematography looks very specific. I don't know that it looks really, really gorgeous or anything, but it looks really competent. Just genuinely interested in this from top to bottom, and exactly what I was hoping for when you brought this title up.
Love it. Yeah, it looks like timely COVID viewing in a way, just with contagiousness at its center in a way. It kind of looks like it starts with one particular character thinking she's going to die tomorrow, but that idea quickly, other people quickly having that same idea. So yeah, timely COVID viewing, I think. I think it looks fun.
Yeah, an assortment of actors and actresses that I'm very fond of. From top to bottom, this is great. Love to see Amy's film here, and hopefully she'll make some more.
Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. We recently joined as members, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co.
On to RoboCop.
We get the best of both worlds. The fastest reflexes modern technology has to offer, onboard computer-assisted memory, and a lifetime of on-the-street law enforcement programming. It is my great pleasure to present to you RoboCop.
This guy is really good.
He's not a guy, he's a machine.
Old Detroit has a cancer. Cancer is crime.
Let the woman go. You are under arrest.
You better back up, pal!
Your move, creep.
What are your prime directives?
You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney.
What is this shit?
Anything you say may be used against you.
The first of our two Paul Verhoeven movies today. This one's from 1987. RoboCop. This is one you have seen before, I understand.
Yes, I had watched it at some point as a child and retained essentially zero memory of it, other than I apparently liked it enough whenever I saw it to end up getting a RoboCop action figure at like the age of 4.
Ah, nice. Yeah, I don't know if I ever saw it. There are so many images from it that I have in my head, but I kind of feel like I might have just absorbed those from like culture over time. I don't know that I ever sat down and watched this. I might have saw it on TV. If it ever played on TV, kind of seems unlikely because of how violent it is.
Well, they used to re-edit films specifically for being on TV and insert like trailer times and remove content.
Very possible.
So I'm sure it played on TV. This is exactly the type of title you would want on your Channel 4 at like 7 p.m. on a Saturday or something.
Had it play for you this time.
Yeah, it's an interesting film. I think that I find it more interesting than I like it. I appreciate it more than I enjoy it. Those types of words. How did you find it?
I was not as enthusiastic about it as I had hoped I would be, but I had a good time. Well, I'm sure we will use the word satire plenty of times while talking about Paul Verhoeven.
Well, this was a very serious film, no satire to be found.
Clearly, not at all. I think with both of these movies, as we'll talk about Starship Troopers next, he has a way of having his cake and eating it too. Mm-hmm. And I think I do like the more. I do like the satirical elements of this more so than I do the stretches that are just kind of pure 80s action. Which I think there are stretches of this movie and Starship Troopers that are just the action that is getting people in the door that many people came to the movie to see. And that doesn't do a whole lot for me, but I think that the ways that it does carry out its satire, I think, are pretty fun and amusing.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that I definitely responded with a little bit more joy than you to some of the action sequences, like in the parking garage where he's rolling and rolling and rolling and gets in the car, and just watching how many times he is shot. There's not only comedy to it, but some interesting action cinematography. I think at bare minimum is found throughout both this and Starship Troopers, especially the way that the bullets actually feel like they're somewhat real in this 1980s action film. I find very tangible. And I was interested to note that this cinematographer also worked on Total Recall, which has a very similar tone in it, personally. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember kind of this serious, down-to-earth grittiness.
Yeah. I think this one at times feels more sincere than Starship Troopers, particularly insofar as it wants us, or kind of expects or asks us to sympathize with RoboCop as having kind of become this corporate slave after Murphy, the human character himself, has died, which I think works better for me in just kind of an abstract sense of people being enslaved by their corporate employers in a way and unable to kind of fight back against them, versus the way those scenes play quite literally, like when he takes off his masks, and I think those are meant to inject some pathos into the thing. I don't know that I really feel the empathy that it wants to achieve, but I can appreciate it in sort of a distanced way.
Yeah, I would agree that it's not effective, but it is essentially like what one does in a story like that. And to me, that's just like the surface stuff to a more interesting story going on. As much as Directive 4 is ironic satire, it's also, there's a point to be made about it. It certainly serves the plot, but it also has an undercurrent value that the whole screenplay has, which is that criticism of corporatocracies and their linkages to profiting off of controlling violence, essentially.
Yeah, which, it's hard not to think about it in the context of 2020. I think it's very relevant in the context of 2020, and with the many instances of very strong-handed policing that we've seen over the past few months now. But I can't decide if it's really the best satire for today, because it seems to be putting most of the blame for all this strong-handedness on the fact that the police have been privatized, whereas, in the context of what we're watching on the news every day, you don't need the police to be privatized for them to be very, very heavy-handed in their response to things. So I don't know that the satire, totally works here, because it's partly empathizing with the human cops in this story. and seeing them as the victims of their corporate overseers in a way. So I could maybe understand why this would maybe leave a bad taste in someone's mouth today, but you read it differently, and I think it works. It's maybe a little malleable.
Yeah, I definitely don't try to personally apply it to today, because that's, you know, applying simplistic satire that's pretty much bicameral. It's binary. There's one side and another side, and then there's a hero's journey of a man who was killed along the way. Whereas now, you know, you just can't have a simplistic conversation about anything going on today. So I definitely don't personally try to apply it to today so much as look at it as an artifact of the Vietnam War and the Cold War and a lot of like fear-mongering mass media at its inception kind of in the late 80s, early 90s. That's the way that I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could look at anything through multiple lenses, right? Whether you look at Night of the Living Dead and you see that as related to the Vietnam War, you watch it today, you also see a black guy shot by police at the end. That has relevance today. I mean, you can always look at these things through multiple lenses, right? But that is interesting. I actually had not thought about the Vietnam War or Cold War because of the nuclear comments, right? That's what you're referring to.
Well, and the timing, you know, 1987, just and knowing that Paul comes from the European area and, you know, he's expressing fears about kind of this Cold War era. But also this, you know, post everybody getting shot to death in Vietnam as well. You know, it's still very much in the cultural moment. I think, when did Platoon come out? Like right after Full Metal Jacket. So, you know, it's still very much in the psyche of everyone. And I mean, maybe I'm off base there, but I definitely just saw reflections of the bloodshed and kind of the mindlessness of the drug trade, which, you know, the war on drugs started by Nixon. You know, there's just a lot going on in this.
Yeah, and just the idea of the sort of it's such a cliche to say the glamorization of violence, but I don't know how else to put it, you know, whether it's the ad where a guy is spitting the pistol and RoboCop does the move himself. It's, you know, similar idea with the nuclear war stuff where people are just finding the violence cool and fun. And he certainly leads us to almost be guilty of that ourselves by just making the action that he delivers pretty fun.
Yeah.
He almost kind of makes us culpable in a way, which is kind of smart.
Yeah, like, you know, the whole gas station scene where, you know, his emotions end up causing massive scale destruction from the gas station blowing up, and then him placing a very simple shot to kill the guy on the motorcycle. You know, he could have done that essentially about 1 minute beforehand. And you know, so there's the criticism of emotions, which is also the point of the film getting in the way. There's definitely a lot on the mind of Paul Verhoeven, and he seems to not have let up since then on his mindfulness of things. I don't remember Elle super specifically, but I do remember being deeply morally interested in the plotting of that film, and a very interesting director to come from Europe and kind of make his way through LA and tell stories that feel very specific to him, but also very unanimously distinctive amongst each other. Although I feel like satire applies to Starship Troopers, it's an entirely separate adaptation of another work, which was a novel. So very interesting.
Yeah, and as much as I do enjoy RoboCop and Starship Troopers for a variety of reasons, they are capital letters satire, and I think that's why I still like something like Elle at the end of the day, is that that just feels more just like complex drama in a way.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is just more
psychological
relatable.
Thriller.
Yeah. You know, taste comes into it at some point, and I think that's why I probably still rather rewatch Elle than some of these, but
or
I kind of like all this stuff.
Like, I find myself preferring the satire of Putney Swope, over this. Like there's something to comedy satire, which maybe it's just easier to palate and funner to go along with than you know, brutal sequences of violence, and all that entails. But you know, the one connection we do have in this film and in Miami Vice, besides the brutal action sequences, is the Coke relationship.
Oh yes.
So just creating that, throwing that out there.
Yeah. There's some fun acting. You know, I kind of like the part of this that is just about like office rivalry in the most ruthless kind of way playing itself out. That is kind of amusing as much as it is also very violent and grotesque. I do think he nicely makes these humorous without just feeling too dopey or cartoonish. I don't know. The action combined with the comedy is nicely done, I guess.
Yeah, he has a penchant for unique casting choices that I just don't ascribe to other directors. You know, Nancy Allen is by all means not, you know, the femme fatale, you know, that you would have gone with at the time. You know, I think that I'd be much more like, of course, that he cast like Demi Moore or, you know, that type of like action, potential action, also beauty. Nancy Allen was a lot less like, based on my understanding, of a sex symbol, and he, you know, later in Starship Troopers literally just cast a sex symbol in Denise Richards. Yeah. And then the choice for Peter Weller, I just can't imagine going with anybody else now, but like what a distinctive face to choose. Like what a wholly unique face. It's very interesting because as much as he is a human, he doesn't feel like a human when I look at him. He feels like a cyborg even before he's turned into one.
I agree. That's, I think, a great point. Like, his face works for this role, and I think that works better than his, like, personality does, which to me is kind of a non-personality, which you can argue is the point. Yes. You have to be okay with it, like, your main character being kind of a non-character in a way, which kind of has its pros and cons. Certainly, in just a abstract way, it has its advantages because he just feels that much more like a corporate cog, like he has been created to be a slave to management. But I think that does come at the expense of those scenes where he's going home to his family or something like that. Just not carry that much pathos for me. You have to be on board with the idea than the execution. Yeah,
agreed. Without being on board with some of those ideas, the execution gets very dense, we'll say.
Yeah.
What was I trying to... Oh, yeah, Kurtwood Smith plays a villain in this. Red Foreman, you might remember from that 70s show. That entire subplot I found much more involving than the actual Directive 4 sequence near the end. How did you feel about the different, I guess, story segments that end up being action segments in the film?
I think he does a very good job in those sections. I don't know why the image that pops into my mind is of him, taking the pin out of a grenade with his mouth, and that is just he's just an entertaining kind of scumbag of a criminal. I think he carries those sequences in a pretty entertaining way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think the two pieces of film craft that I found most valuable in this piece were the makeup, which was incredibly well done. If you look at, a single image still of him after he's turned into RoboCop, and you look at the edges of where the machine is at a lower density than the face, it's just so meticulous of a makeup job. It looks so realistic, even though it's fake. It doesn't matter because there's so much talent and effort and artistry put into that makeup job that I just really, really respect it, as well as the practical effects of the gunshots and all that stuff.
Or the guy who turns into the goo monster after being boiled or whatever.
So good. And then he turns into just liquid on a car.
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching that with Gabby, my girlfriend, at the time, and she was kind of half watching, but she looked up at that one and just said, whoa. It takes like a real turn there for a second.
It does. That's straight up ghouly gremlin looking makeup design.
Yeah.
And then the second most valuable piece of film craft, I think, was the stop motion animation of the larger robots. For 1987, and what I understand was quite the small budget, I think that's really, really well done.
Yeah. And I think just the how the script handles the relationship between that particular criminal and, is it Dick Jones? Who's our main executive?
Yes, it is Dick Jones.
Just the whole conceit of him and the company cracking down on crime for the sake of this real estate deal, but at the same time exploiting these criminals to further the same idea. Like there's clearly no interest in dealing with crime for any good, upstanding moral reason, because he's happy to take the business of the criminals if it's going to further this deal along, and it's only means of crushing the very thing that they created. It's all very nicely scripted.
Do you have a favorite scene?
What is my favorite scene? Do you have one off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'd go with the Coke factory shootout sequence. I think that is by far one of the most just hammy and enjoyable sequences of violence without me having any remorse for the actions that are, no questionable morals, just kill them all.
I kind of like the scene where, who is the criminal with the glasses? What is this actor's name again? Kurtwood Smith. Yeah, when he comes to the younger executive's house and puts in the videotape, and just I think the videotape is hilarious in itself, of the older guy in the company not taking any shit from the younger guy is just kind of hilarious. Also, even just like a smaller bit is in the very end when RoboCop is about to shoot Dick Jones. The one black guy in the room stands up and has that big smile on his face as he's ready to see Dick Jones get fired. A hilarious shot. He's like, yeah, let's do this. I enjoyed that.
You're fired, Dick.
Yes. Great ending.
On to Starship Troopers.
Now the youth of tomorrow must travel across the stars to defend our world.
We are a generation commanded by fate to defend humankind.
Everyone fights, no one quits.
We are going in with first wave. You smash the entire area. You kill anything that has more than 2 legs. You get me? We get you, sir.
But they will face an enemy more devastating than any ever imagined.
Here it comes!
Incoming!
All right, Michael. Totally unlike the previous film we discussed, this is a action satire film with extended sequences of violence.
Moving on. That's it, right?
That's it.
Starring Denise Richards, as you mentioned, Neil Patrick Harris. I don't know the actor, the name of the lead actor, Johnny Rico.
Casper Van Dien, or Dine, I don't know which.
Who I enjoy. I think he is an entertaining lead.
I do find him entertaining. I don't know that that's because of acting talent so much as just the entertainment of the film happening to him.
Correct. I'm with you on that. How'd this one play for you?
It was a trip down memory lane. Before I rewatched this film, I did rewatch the DreamWorks animated film starring Woody Allen, Ants, which had a playful riff on some of the content within Starship Troopers during the sequence when they attack the termites. And just seeing those action sequences again, not only in Ants, but here in the film Starship Troopers, brought back a lot of nostalgia for me, a lot of joy. It was also very funny to see Denise Richards play a space captain, remembering that when we were growing up, Pierce Brosnan's, I believe it was The World Is Not Enough 007 film, she played a nuclear physicist. And so just going down that memory lane of the absurd 90s was, it was fun.
Yeah, I have not seen Denise Richards in anything in quite a while. It does feel like she is trapped in the 90s somehow, because I can't even think of what the last thing I saw her in was, but I very much enjoy her here.
Yes, I have to imagine it was something low budget that I accidentally watched, or where she was, like the big name that helped get funding on maybe an independent project, but I couldn't tell you what it would be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like this movie. Just plain and simple, it's not a great movie, but I just like it. I like the absurdism of it. I like the cultural critiques. I like the trailer sequences where they're doing those marketing shots that just took me straight back to Putney Swope. I like the projected integration of clicking on buttons with the internet. It's just so effective. I really, really like it.
Yeah, it's just kind of crazy to me that at the time of its release, it seems like there were plenty of folks who just didn't really see it as satire and kind of wrote it off as schlock, aimed mainly for younger audiences, who I think very much did enjoy it for that reason. I think I probably did, although I don't really remember, like RoboCop, I don't really remember seeing it, but I just have some of these sequences in my memory. You watch it now, it's like how could you not see this as satire?
Well, this was a point in time where they were blaming Eminem for violent crime. They thought that Satanism was real. You still couldn't convince people that playing certain vinyl records backwards wasn't a call to Satan.
We've come a long way.
We didn't have the internet. We've come a very long way.
Yeah. I'm with you on everything. I think it's a lot of fun. I think the satire is very amusing. But yeah, the ads where you see, the soldiers giving their guns. Would you like to hear more? At the end of every ad, you see them giving their guns to the kids and them fighting over the gun. It just screams parody to me. And yeah, it's it's not like you want to disrespect the critics who have come before you, but through the eyes of today, it's very capital letters of satire for me the whole way through.
Oh, absolutely. I haven't read the Heinlein novel in a long time, but I think that if you read the novel and don't think that it's cultural criticism to begin with, and that it's serious, and then you watch the film and treat it as serious about the belief structures of Heinlein or of Verhoeven, that they think that lives should be thrown endlessly towards war. I think that that's a very foolish premise, because I think that it's very directly criticism of world wars and of incursions, the novel itself, and that the film is, a reflection not only of the criticisms of the wars locally on Earth, but also of the worried future of corporatism leading, for wealth outside the solar system.
Yeah. And some of the satire is in just tossed off details that I kind of like, where just after Buenos Aires has been destroyed and they're all getting amped up and ready to go, there's the one interview where a news guy says, well, some people think that it's because we took the first step of invading their airspace or whatever. It was like that. And Johnny Rico had none of that. He's just ready to kill some bugs.
Yeah.
Or the kind of battling news anchors, and one guy says, I find the idea of a intelligent bug offensive, or something like that.
Yes, that all feels so... Well, I think all of the televised sequences feel so poignant today. Whether or not it's on the actual television, or if it's on, websites and those stupid pop-ups that ask you to tap here to unmute. All those sequences I think are just so ripe today, because now essentially it doesn't matter what you're saying as long as you're saying something. That's the demand for the content. And the more sensationalized, the more valuable, which is essentially the entire premise of the media in this film, which, you know, it couldn't have aged more gracefully.
I agree. And again, not to repeat this phrase, but that idea of kind of having his cake and eating it too. Like he's, you know, very much
having his pie and eating it too.
Yeah,
totally spun it off.
He's very, you know, much talking about the use of beautiful young people in propaganda to recruit people and excite people about whatever agenda, you know, an authority or a government might have. Well, at the same time, the very soapy elements of this movie just take advantage of that in the same way and kind of force you to like try and stop yourselves at times and be like, am I almost getting into this too much myself?
Yeah.
Because it starts to play just straightforward. You kind of have to check yourself at some point.
But it's also, not only do you have to check yourself, but you also don't have to shrink from liking it. Because aesthetically, the content is fun. Or it's goofy, right? Denise Richards' rocket ship is just straight up goofy, and watching her pilot it is hilarious. And then those action sequences are really cool. Like, it's very effective cinematography, especially during the final action sequence when he gets stabbed in the leg. Just that whole shootout, you know, up until the screen goes black as he gets... whatever those aliens are called, the arachnid stabs him in the leg, right? And then it goes to black. That entire sequence was just so thrilling to watch that you don't have to be mindful of the parody or any of that stuff just to go, that's a good action sequence. And that's why I think Paul Verhoeven's very interesting as a director, because he's good at shooting action and also wants to do something besides that. And he makes, I mean, in this film particularly, he is delving into that multimedia layer where he's integrating, you know, action sequences, like you said, soap opera, over dramatization, but then has like these web browser things and the trailers that feel like they're interactive, but they're not. I just think it's really, really effective filmmaking that, I mean, he's kind of, I can't say that he's not an auteur. He feels like he's an auteur. As much as I'm not well versed in his oeuvre, I feel like he is a distinctive filmmaker.
Oh, I'm completely there with you. There is plenty of his films that I haven't seen, but I would not argue against giving him that title.
You more recently saw Basic Instinct. Do you see any relationship between either of these films and Basic Instinct? I literally haven't seen it since the 90s.
I love Basic Instinct. That is kind of a problematic fave of mine. I really don't see that one as satirical in the same way. It is. I think it does.
Why is it a problematic film?
There's the scene in particular I'm thinking of that makes me use that word is one where Michael Douglas comes awfully close to raping not Sharon Stone but this other character. That's just
okay.
one.
So the content of it, but not not the experiences. It's just a film that has a sequence which could be like triggering or whatever.
You know, the sex and violence is his thing. Like, that's one where he's pushing it a little bit.
I've never heard that any actors or actresses have ever had any problems. I've heard extensive interviews with Sharon Stone saying that was one of the safest sets she was ever on. So I was just like, what do you mean?
Yeah, not because of extra textual stuff. It's just, it's maybe up for debate, like, you know, how far he's pushing things in certain scenes.
Sure. Well, I'm glad that he's pushing things. That's great.
Yeah. I just think that is absolute peak pulpy 90s erotic thriller with some Hitchcockian flair to it. Like, I just think it is so much fun. And it's not satirical in the same way that these are, although it might be sort of making fun of some of the male characters in that movie at times. But yeah, so I might actually kind of like divide, at least the ones that I've seen, I would put Elle and Basic Instinct into one category, and then Starship Troopers and RoboCop into another one.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would too. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I mean, I've seen Basic Instinct not for over 2 decades, and then I saw Elle 2016 whenever it came out. I think I saw that one in theaters, if I'm remembering correctly. And then these two, and they just feel like, while they're so distinctly, really effectively shot, very physical films, they just feel like they're different parts of a canon.
Yeah. I feel like you read about Verhoeven and you read about his interest in sex and violence, and I see RoboCop and Starship Troopers is more about violence and his kind of more political films, and then there is much more sexiness in Basic Instinct and L, for sure.
Yes.
With violence as well, but...
Yeah. Definitely sexiness for sure, but the word erotic, right? Like, I definitely think that L and Basic Instinct are more erotic. One thing I do find very interesting in RoboCop and Starship Troopers is his depiction of sexuality as a group by using the locker room. He uses the locker room not only in RoboCop, which is both genders, but he uses it in Starship Troopers, and it's very odd that it just kind of removes the eroticness. And I think that is a criticism of the corporatocracy that he is criticizing, showing that it's removed this erotic separation between these two groups and kind of conglomerated them together towards the furthering of, a cost-effective achievement of a goal. I think it's a very passive point, but I do think that there's something there.
Yeah, it is kind of a striking scene when you first see that, especially the one for me in Starship Troopers, where you're like, whoa, they share a locker room? Like, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, it's definitely shot a lot more specifically and kind of blatantly. But in RoboCop, you're like, what the fuck, right? Because just out of the corner of your eye, you notice that it's not just the man's locker room. And then it continues, and it's never really addressed, and there's other action going on. But in Starship Troopers, it's just glaringly, full frontal.
yeah, not holding back, that's for sure. Yeah, it's almost kind of like trying to level the differences in gender or something like that in those scenes, just by throwing everyone together in one room, versus something like Basic Instinct that is more about like this almost kind of battle of the sexes, right? Like the opening scene is of a woman murdering a man in bed. There does seem to be a different take on how the genders relate to each other in something like the locker room scenes versus anything in Basic Instinct.
Yeah. Do you have anything that kind of leapt out at you while you were watching this film about either its content or the relationship to Verhoeven's canon or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, certain stuff. When I thought about what it would have felt like to watch this at the time, I think for someone who would have seen this as satire in '97 when it came out, it would have just hit you even harder, I would think, because we're so accustomed to the kind of violence that is in it now. But it is brutal. Like, it is a gory movie, and for this whole movie to be skewering this government for believing in the value of excessive force, and then to be confronted with just like the grotesqueness of that, like, I think that would hit really hard in 1997, whereas in 2020 we're pretty familiar with it.
Yeah.
So I think that diminishes a little bit, but otherwise it holds up really well. You've already talked about that a little bit with the action, but like just the aliens themselves, I think, look pretty great. They're not the most beautiful bugs I've ever seen, but they look like they're just a part of the world in a way a lot of older movies don't. The aliens in older movies don't. So
yeah, they're physically tangible. They feel like animatronics.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I genuinely don't know if we were doing an incursion at the time or not, but as far as I'm aware, when this film came out, we were not at war. We've been at war about 20 years now. So I do question whether or not this was so culturally offensive because we weren't accustomed to this lifestyle that we have now, where it's like, yeah, we're just a nation that's been at war for like 20 years. No big deal. Of course this is satire. We've been at war for 20 years. We've been at war for 1/5 of 100 years. Of course this is satire. We're very familiar with wartime behavior because we've spent the last 20 years in it. So I do question whether or not, it was just a bunch of mixed emotions at the time in the country and in the world about violence and, not wanting to make jokes about it and, taking it very seriously and that sort of a thing. So I feel like I can't get a read on what it was like really in the 90s because I was a kid. that I just wasn't exposed to what adults of different varying cultures were feeling. I suspect that not being at war was the number one reason, though, with why this couldn't be interpreted easily as satire amongst critics.
Yeah, you might have watched it and just wonder, like, who do you think this is a stand for as of right now? Where I think he maybe meant it in a kind of theoretical way, like this is
I think it's a meta text.
Yeah.
Robert Heinlein's book, I believe, is metatextual. It's not about a specific thing. It's about all humans going into space. It's on the premise that you can't not go to space because the Earth is a capitalist structure now. And if you're constantly expanding and you reach the finitude of your Earth, which is a circumference finitude, then you have to go out. And you're always going to have to go out, and that's where the criticism comes from.
Yeah, so what I'd heard about the original text, although I haven't read it, was that some people thought that was meant sincerely, although it was kind of defended as satire. But some people did not believe that to be the case, and then sort of ironically, Starship Troopers was meant to be satire, and people wrote it off as sincere or something like that. I don't know if that's... I'm not familiar with the original text.
Heinlein's not a satirist, but he I believe was certainly concerned about humans as we moved forward. He was more interested in the, cosmic sociology of people moving on. He was a very famed, very well-deserving science fiction writer. And although I don't believe it was directly satirical, I believe that there are criticisms within the text, based on what I remember of it, it's been over a decade now, of the natural structures. I mean, they're not natural, but they become natural. They're the capitalist system as you move out. We just saw a asteroid or a meteor, I don't remember which, worth more than the GDP of the entire planet, that we could go mine. Right now. Like, we could, if we just got the money together and built the tech, we could go get it right now. And he knew that back then, and he was writing about the concerns that come with getting all that wealth as you get off planet. So, although it wasn't, in my interpretation, written as satire, it was written as criticism, and sometimes criticism is comedy.
Yeah. I think regardless of whether you see Verhoeven as satirizing what he saw as a text that was sincere or adapting a text that he thought was satire, however you take it, like, it's satire in the end, and just the fact that it was made at this scale, at this budget, that was approved by whatever studio. I don't know which studio put it out, or if it was one of the majors or not, but it just seems like such an anomaly when I think about just blockbuster film, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, remember the sequence where the drill sergeant says, anybody, think they can take me? And then the dumb farm boy goes and gets his arm broken, and then, a good 10 seconds later, he goes, medic!
Yeah.
And then that guy's like, I can't get my helmet to fit. And then he gets shot in the head.
We hear that a handful of times.
And he dies, and then they yell for the medic, and his head's just riddled with bullet holes. I mean, it's just so clearly satire. Yeah. Did you have a favorite scene?
Oh, man. I think the breakup video is kind of hilarious. I enjoyed that quite a bit. I enjoyed most of the scenes with... Is it Michael Ironside who plays the guy who was the teacher who becomes a sergeant or whatever? Really enjoyed him.
Yeah.
That's his name.
Rakchak?
Is that his name in the movie? That's
I think it's John or Jean Rakchak. Yeah, because it's Rakchak's Roughnecks, right?
Yeah.
And then it's Rico's Roughnecks.
His toughness, like the way he just embodies like the rah culture is just like spot on. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, all the action cinematography was just so good that it's very hard to pick, and it's very hard to exclude certain marketing sequences. So I'll say that my favorite was the one that I already brought up, which is that single kind of action sequence where they're falling back and Rico ends up getting stabbed in the leg by the arachnid as he loses, his cohorts and barely kills it, and then it stabs him with its dying breath or whatever. But I will say my runner-up, just real quick, and that is the first time we see a news anchor.
Oh, right at the beginning, right?
During where he's just doing a basic report, and then the arachnid just like spears him and starts eating him or cuts him in half or whatever.
Oh yeah,
and it's just I love it. I just loved that scene too.
We haven't talked about Neil Patrick Harris a lot either, but again, that felt like some inspired casting, especially when he's coming out towards the end in what looks like just a straight up Nazi garb, those black outfits. It's just and I mean, so over the top.
Gosh, Jake Busey, right? He's the tall blonde guy who looks like Gary Busey.
Oh yeah, okay, I can see that.
Right, like there's a certain Nazi efficient looking casting to this film that definitely I think has some points that are made aesthetically by it.
Yeah, I don't know how accurate it is, but I think I've heard that there are sequences that like shot for shot were matched with Triumph of the Will.
Oh goodness, I had no idea about that.
Yeah, I saw that in passing. I was like, wow, that is really specific satire.
But I guess that makes sense. There's a lot for Verhoeven as a local European citizen to criticize from his native land. So yeah, I could totally see that. I just did not see that.
Yeah, me neither. I saw that after the fact, most definitely. Starship Troopers.
On to Michael Mann's Miami Vice.
Are you afraid of violence? We get down if the play calls for it, bud.
We're here for business.
That's right.
We can close each other's eyes right now real fast. Then ain't nobody gonna make no money.
This is Detective Crockett, Miami-Dade PD. We got him. No one has ever tread before where we are now. We're seeing their operations from the inside.
Your agency cannot know how they do whatever it is they do.
Take it to the limit one more time.
First come in the game, they try to play. Then you drop a couple of hits, look how they wait to you. Boeing Jets, Global Express, out the country, but the blueberry still connect.
Things get emotional, moves get messy, and the wrong people die.
Just to aim at you, probably blame you. If I owe you, I'm blowing you the same. Take one for your team.
There's undercover, and then there's which way is up.
You think I'm in so deep I forgot?
All right, Michael, this is a delightful, fantastic film starring Jamie Foxx and Colin Farrell. What was your feelings about this film?
I like this movie a lot. I had never seen it before. Had been very familiar with it. And first and foremost, just kind of wowed by the aesthetics of it more so than the plot. I feel like this is the perfect example for me of the clothesline plot where it's just kind of getting me from one scene to the next so I can just enjoy whatever it is Michael Mann has to shoot and show us. I dig it. What about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with that clothesline statement. I don't really know how to express what I think about the narrative. It's so effectively edited and so well communicated visually that I'm already in the place and the time before I notice which characters are delivering their plot devices. And that is just so unique and special. I wish that I could communicate more clearly what I see happening, but what I see happening is literally visual. It's not textual, and that is so excellent. It's just so good, and it looks so good. This is a film I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, for me, the style is it's captivating partly because it feels on one hand very stylized and on the other hand very realistic. At times there are shots that just feel more documentary like, and it's just kind of that balance of
a lot of those shipping freighter shots, those cargo shots, very documentarian cinematography.
Yeah, I think of scenes in the club or in Cuba where the camera is not looking at our characters, but just the other people, when it just goes to look at like the performers or dancers in the club, and that all just feels like it's just kind of immersive.
That club
world
sequence
building.
Was so good.
Which one?
The intro club sequence.
Oh yeah,
that's one of those great sequences where when I watched that, I was like, all right, Nolan, you saw that and you were like, you know what, Michael Mann, I'm going to try to do a little bit better. I'm going to do the intro scene to The Dark Knight with this great bank heist, and I'm going to raise the bar. Like, I see such direct influence from Mann into Nolan. Not specifically that scene, but yeah.
Yeah, that's one difference I've heard of between theatrical and director's cut, is that the theatrical, I thought, started... Well, I saw the theatrical, I should say that first, which starts immediately in the club with the Linkin Park Jay-Z mashup. Does the director's cut start elsewhere?
Yes, yes. The director's cut starts underwater.
Got it.
And then you raise out of the water, and you are on the Gojos, or Mojos, the Mojo boats.
The Go Fast boats, right?
Well, that's what they're called.
Is there a nickname for them or something?
Well, the brand of shirt that they were wearing, and I think the brand that was on the boat, because it's like a race boat, right, is Mojo, I think. And they were out, like, just playing with them. I mean, I genuinely don't know what they were doing. And maybe that's, something that I totally glossed over, that they were doing something and I wasn't aware of it. And then the film kind of progresses into them going in to do the job that's in the club. And I do remember being in the theater originally and it starting in the club, and just how thrilling a sequence that was. I think both work really, really well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just don't know that there are... Generally speaking, I just don't usually care for cinematography and the look of a film that is so obviously digital, but I just feel like there are a small number of directors who really understand how digital cameras absorb light and the quality of images that they can produce. I feel like Cronenberg is one. There were times I kind of thought about the look of something like Cosmopolis and just kind of the flatness of that digital imagery. I think Pedro Costa really gets it too, and this is a very, like, obviously digital film, and it just looks so good. It's crazy. And I think that gets you very far. I feel like it is not a widely beloved movie, right? Like, I feel like this was actually kind of panned at the time it came out.
This is very mixed. Yeah. I think it's like 60% on Rotten, somewhere in the 50s on Meta.
Yeah. If you're here first and foremost for plot, I think that can get a little convoluted. Some of the lines can be a little close to corny, but if you're here for the look, for the style, my God, you can't really top that.
I think that whatever brought you here, the looks and the style keep you here.
Word. Nicely said.
And keep it memorable. I think that this is one of those first movies where I truly began to be exposed to the idea of digital cinematography. When I watched this, I certainly didn't know how to think about it, or I just noticed that, whoa, this looks really good, and whoa, this looks really different. But it also is shot in like a way that's indisputable. It's shot the way that, mountains are you can't say that a mountain's not there. It's there. The way that this is shot is just so physical and so inserting of place and time, but the time doesn't matter, but you know that the time is there. Like, when you're in Cuba dancing, it has a tangible feel to the time. When you're doing, I don't know if it was in the theatrical cut, but in the director's cut, when you're going down to see Li Gong talking to the Kingpin, you have this beautiful, just sumptuously gorgeous overhead shot of this, like, super waterfall rainforest reservoir.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like, exactly where you are, even though you have no clue where you are, because of that not only the editing, but that cinematography. And that is just constant throughout this piece, whether you're on the freighters or whether you're in the Go Fast boats or in those airplanes, and you're looking at the radar blip, and just he's using visuals to tell the story, and then there's some ADR that's happening, and there's some like dialogue, but you don't really need that to figure out what's going on. Like, if you watch this movie on mute, you'd still have a pretty good understanding.
Oh yeah, except that I love the soundtrack to this movie, which is very like 2000s. It's like, I think about that waterfall shot you're talking about. There's some, I don't know what band it is, but there's some, you know, mid 2000s rock playing there. There's Linkin Park, you know, it is very much of its time.
I definitely was checking, so on the Google Pixel 2, which is the phone I have, it has the Google Assistant, and on the bottom of my phone, when it's like not on and just has the dark screen, it'll tell me the songs that it hears, and I definitely like kept picking my phone up to go like, what song is this? Because I've heard this song, but I have no recollection of, number one, the name of the song, or number two, the band. And that happens so often where I was just like, I know this song, didn't know that band.
Yeah, which I completely get that people might just not dig the 2000s rock and that kind of thing. To me, I love that the music feels very of its time, while the visual style feels very ahead of its time. Like, you just don't find many movies that look like this. Even now, and this, you know, it's almost 15 years later. So. Oh,
interesting. I don't think that I've ever applied that logic to it. I think that, to me, Michael Mann is so distinctive a filmmaker that his images are kind of separate from the canon, almost, where it's like the same as Terrence Malick. Like, not only are they, you could say, ahead of his time or whatever, they're just not even part of the timeline. Like, to me, Malick and Michael Mann are like, they're making their things, and their stuff, like, might make canonical sense in a gallery, like side by side, but they just don't belong in the broader, like, museum of film where they should be put side by side with other entries from the same year. Like, what they're doing is just what they're doing.
Yeah, like, you'll see, you know, plenty of action films borrow kind of tropes or kind of ideas for scenes from Michael Mann movies, like Heat, all the time. But really, do you see movies that, you know, whose images have the same quality of the digital images in this movie? That feels pretty distinctive and dope.
Yeah, definitely. It feels dope as hell, dude. And that's one of the other interesting things is, like, with distinctive digital cinematographers and filmmakers, I don't feel like they have that much commonality. Like, I'd say that Cronenberg is a lot closer to Soderbergh than I'd say that either are close to Mann. And then, like, Sean Baker, like, gosh, I just can't think of another filmmaker that I would really feel comfortable expressing that. Like, maybe High Flying Bird from Soderbergh, a single entry, is kind of similar. Maybe Girlfriend Experience is kind of like Tangerine, the 2009 film that he made. But by and large, canonically, I think that they're just very different.
Yeah, kind of a loose comparison to be made, but maybe it's just in the sense that they're each doing their own thing. Maybe that is the commonality. Yeah,
and maybe that's what, you know, it makes it so easy to say that these are the great auteurs.
Yeah. How do you like this relative to other Michael Mann movies?
That's a great question. I think it's my favorite.
Nice.
And that's primarily because I have very limited experience with other Michael Mann films. 2018, 2019, no, it would have been like 2018, right before we started the show, probably. Keith Ulick had, for whatever year it came out, made Black Hat like one of his number one favorite films. And I went back and I watched the director's cut that was some special version on top of director's cut, and I was absolutely flabbergasted by it. I'd still put it in one of the top films that year, but to me, Miami Vice is just, it's kind of like a Shakespeare thing. Like, it's just, it's a tale too big for words. It's two justice, you know, guys, and a woman on the other side of the law line, and then a woman on the other side of, or on the same side of the law line being taken, and that's so Shakespearean. Like, you don't have to limit this to the name Miami Vice, you don't have to limit this to Miami. You could reshoot this same film in 100 years and it would still feel the same. And I think that that screenplay, although I wouldn't say that the writing's the best with this film, there's something about it that does make it at that gosh, what's the term for that? Where you can be in multiple places at once.
I can't think of the word.
Superposition.
Gotcha.
It's a screenplay that is in a superposition of time, where this version of the film is here, and you could take this and adapt it and switch the jurisdictions, the locales, and the justice systems that are in play, and still tell the same exact story somewhere else. And I think that is what makes this a very just valuable text, which I guess I didn't know until I just said it, that I do find it to be a valuable text. Like, it is very special. You could tell the same story in the beginning about the sex trafficking trade in 100 years differently. Like, this is just such Shakespearean stuff.
Yeah. And you mentioned the romance. Like, I sound like I've totally written off the plot, but I do think that, like, is very much central to the feeling of the movie overall, and there's something kind of operatic about that. I'm with you. I think, or to the extent that it sounds like you, like, that part of it worked for you. I'm with you.
Yeah, the Romeo and Juliet-ish part of it. Yeah, it's not erotic like we were talking about with Verhoeven. It's more of like a sumptuous romance where, like, it certainly has its sexiness, but it's not about the sexiness. It's about the loveliness.
Yeah, and I don't know how the director's cut ends. The theatrical cut ends with almost kind of this, like, insignificant shot of Colin Farrell just walking back into the hospital to see, you know, where the one colleague has just been destroyed by the explosion. Is it the same last shot in the theatrical cut of him walking back into the hospital? No.
I mean, Jamie Foxx is in the hospital.
Yeah,
in the director's cut, him and Li Gong are somewhere else.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's like materially different.
I don't know where they are, but they are on a beach somewhere else.
Happier ending.
Well, you don't know if he's going to leave her.
Okay.
There's a little bit of a different energy going on where you just don't quite know. I mean, I think that's the single last image, but that's definitely the last image of Colin Farrell that I recall is them just on the beach. So, I mean, if that's how Michael Mann wants it to be, that is certainly a materially different ending than the theatrical cut had.
Yeah. I mean, I like the theatrical ending where you see them on a beach, but then he watches her leave on a different boat, and you see him go back into the hospital. So just kind of taking the beginning and the ending together, which the beginning starts in media res, you're in the club, this sting operation is going on. The last shot is like, it hardly even feels like an ending. Like, he's just walking back into the hospital, and there's really, like, nothing terribly significant about it, and it just feels like this is just one episode in the lives of these people, because we've been so dropped into all of this. That's just kind of fun, the way that it opens and closes, but very different, evidently.
Yeah, well, I think that they could be interpreted similarly. You know, there's a lot of room for all of the same stuff to happen.
Fair enough. Any favorite images, sequences, scenes, moments?
Yeah, so from 0001 to 22857, that was my favorite part. Just
good
the
pick.
whole movie,
Good pick.
right? Boy, that's tough. Just a single scene. You are putting the screws to me. Do you have one?
Really specific, like an image that comes to mind is after the one colleague of theirs has been taken by the trailer park guys, and they've just broken into the trailer home. There's that close up of Jamie Foxx, which is just so tight, and like his head is just kind of bobbing in the frame. That's just like one of the images that comes to mind when I think about the ways in which this movie feels more like impressionism than realism. Like, that is not a documentary shot. That is just what it feels like to be in this moment. These really tight close-ups where the face is outside of the frame to some extent. Just one that stuck with me. Yeah.
So I thought of one. It is when Colin Farrell convinces Li Gong to go to Cuba, and they're in the Go Fast boat, the Mojo boat. And just that whole sequence, there's something that I just found enrapturing about watching those Go Fast boats on just that level plane of water. And just, you know, it feels so out of this world. Like, just, it, you know, it's like the same feeling of reading Cormac McCarthy with his lead character on a horse, galloping fast away from violence. Like, there's just something deeply literal, deep in the wells of literature. When I watch that skating sequence, I can project forward and think of great pieces of science fiction in which ships are going faster. I can think about riding on horses, and it's just this superimposition, but it's also just this basic romantic scene. And it's not romantic either. There's just, it's visually pleasurable, and there's a depth to the well of meaning there.
Yeah, like, he reaches over to put her seatbelt on for her.
Yeah.
Nice little touch. Maybe just before that, takes off his coat just to kind of get ready.
Asks her to hold the steering wheel. Yeah.
It's a nice scene.
It's just, it's like an everyday scene that also has all these meanings to it. And it just, I really reacted positively to the whole film and that scene in particular. And then, of course, we talked about the overhead shot of before they go down south. And I think that that's just one of the greatest pieces of digital cinematography probably in that decade. So
very good shot.
I found out that I love Michael Mann after thinking that I love Michael Mann. So now I have proof. About a month and a half ago, you told me, to my utter confusion and delight, that there's an HBO series coming out for Michael Mann.
Yeah, that's right. With I think it's called Tokyo Vice. Is that right? I believe it's Tokyo Vice on HBO Max with Ansel Elgort.
And is that still projected to come out this year?
That I'm not sure about. Last I'd heard it was still in production. I think that's a little ways out.
Okay.
Like I think that was one that had been stopped because of COVID, so they have a little ways to go.
That's a bummer.
Stuff to look forward to.
Well, we did some cursory research before Tokyo Vice. I might be trying to convince you, Michael, to come back and do maybe a little bit more of a retrospective on some of his other titles in the future.
Let's do it.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
You're the best and we love you!
And that's another one in the can.